Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Margaret Raymond, and I'm the Dean of the University of Wisconsin Law School. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 25th Annual Fairchild Lecture. This lecture series recognizes and honors Thomas Edward Fairchild, who served on the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. Initiated by Judge Fairchild's former law clerks, the lectureship brings to the University of Wisconsin Law School a distinguished member of the legal profession from the bench, bar, or the academy to speak on a topic of importance to the profession. Thomas Fairchild was born on Christmas Day in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His educational background included a BA from Cornell University as well as a law degree from this proud law school. Upon his graduation in 1938, he practiced law in Portage, Wisconsin, served as an attorney with the Office of Price Administration during World War II, and practiced with the Milwaukee office of Foley and Lardner. In 1948, he was elected Attorney General of Wisconsin, and in 1951 was appointed United States Attorney for the Western District of Wisconsin. A year later, he resigned to run against U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy. Judge Cudahy commented at Judge Fairchild's death, "I think he thought it was his obligation to accept the challenge. I don't think he expected he was going to win, but thought he would do better than anyone else." He was defeated, but was later elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, serving until 1966, when President Lyndon Johnson appointed him to the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, where he served first as judge and then as senior judge until his death in 2007. I have in the past had the pleasure of sitting with some of Judge Fairchild's clerks and hearing them share stories about the guidance, the integrity, the humor, and the wisdom they gleaned from this extraordinary jurist. It is our honor as his law school to be able to acknowledge him with this lecture series. Let me take the opportunity to welcome the members of the Fairchild family who've joined us today, Susan Chase and Jennifer Lord. Thanks so much for being here. I am also very grateful to the group of Judge Fairchild's clerks who have taken the lead in continuing and advancing the Fairchild Lecture. Could I ask all the clerks to stand up? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And I'd like at this point to introduce Matt Flynn, who has an important message to deliver on behalf of the clerks. Matt's a partner in the Milwaukee office of Quarles & Brady, specializing in complex litigation, a 1975 graduate of our law school, and in 1975-76 was one of Judge Fairchild's law clerks. Matt?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this lecture every year, and especially to the distinguished speaker we have here who joined the bench of the Seventh Circuit the year before I started clerk, and we're truly very fortunate to have him. But I was asked to get up here to tell you about a fundraising effort the clerks have launched to sustain this lecture. Now, for those of us who attended and graduated from the University of Wisconsin Law School like I did, we know what a wonderful law school it is. The faculty that we had was without peer, our colleagues, and the educations we got. But those of us who didn't in this room go to the law school still benefit, in my view, from this lecture series. This lecture series is very, very important to the Wisconsin Law School. With that in mind, I and John Skilton, who is another clerk for Judge Fairchild, who couldn't be with us today, is in San Francisco with Carmen, and his airplane had mechanical difficulties. He won't get back till much later tonight. But I'm speaking for him, too. And we're chairing a fundraising drive to sustain this lecture series. And the law school has told us that the goal that is needed to sustain it is $150,000. The reason for that is we have a reception afterwards, we have mailings, we have a lot of things that are fixed costs that are associated with this lecture. So John and I each made a pledge. There have been other pledges coming in, and it's going quite well. We've sent a mailing to the law clerks. So first of all, to those law clerks who are in the audience, I would very much appreciate it if you would respond, those of you who have not, and contribute to this lecture series. But to those of you who are not law clerks, who didn't get that particular solicitation, Lynn Thompson is in the room. Lynn, I think, where are you sitting? You're sitting somewhere, and in the back, there's Lynn standing. If you are interested in contributing to this development fund for the series, I'd appreciate your giving your business card to Lynn or giving you her name, and she will get you the information. The lecture series will go on one way or the other, but I think it is important to support the law school in doing it. So, Dean, thank you very much for letting me make this presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt. It is now my honor to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Judge William J. Bauer. Judge Bauer has been a member of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals since January 3rd, 1975. Prior to that, he served on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. He was United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, Judge of the 18th Judicial Circuit of the State of Illinois, and State's Attorney of DuPage County. He practiced law with the firm of Erlenborn and Bauer in Elmhurst and served as an adjunct professor at DePaul University College of Law. Judge Bauer is a graduate of Elmhurst College and DePaul University College of Law, but we can still be friends. He was an instructor for NIDA and is past president of the DuPage County Bar Association. He is also a frequent lecturer on trial and appellate practice and the co-author of a book on criminal procedure. Judge Bauer will speak to us today on the war on drugs. Given his experience and his expertise, I'm very much looking forward to his talk, no less so because last night at our law review banquet, Judge Bill Conley told us that not only is Judge Bauer extraordinarily knowledgeable, but he's a very entertaining speaker. So no pressure there, Your Honor, but we're all really looking forward to your talk. Please join me in welcoming Judge Bauer as our Fairchild Lecturer.
Is the person in charge of electronics back there? Oh, there you are. Can you hear me? Goody. The reason I have to ask is I was addicted to one drug, and it was nicotine. From the time I was 14 till I was 50 some odd, I smoked the damn things. Now I was under no illusion that I was doing my health any good. They used to call them coffin nails even then. But I quit, being a good fellow. And 18 months, yeah, but hang on, there's more. 18 months after I quit, they discovered I had cancer of the larynx, which is almost always the result of smoking. And when I finished my 33 treatments, radiation treatments, the oncologist said, you can go back to drinking now, but put water in it. I said, I can live with that. And you can start talking again. And he said, and don't smoke it anymore. I said, when I smoked, it didn't bother me. It's when I quit, I got the goddamn cancer. Having said that, in that disclaimer, I want to give you a couple of more disclaimers. I am a perfect one to talk on the war on drugs. I'd almost be a conscientious objector under normal circumstances on a war on drugs. Everybody in this room uses drugs, or has used them in the past, or is using them now. Because of your definition of drugs is pretty wide. Nicotine is one, alcohol is one. Is there anybody here who has never had alcohol? Or anybody here who doesn't take aspirin? Anybody here who doesn't drink coffee, tea? Any of those? Those are all drugs, each one of them. The concept of calling a war on drugs is a uniquely American thing. We're a warlike people, apparently. We have war on poverty, war on drugs, and so on. I start with another disclaimer. I was born in 1926 in Chicago, and I grew up on the South Side during the Depression at 70th and Woodlawn, Shirley, a neighborhood that was not exactly in the boondocks, someplace removed from humanity. So, but if I had wanted to have a marijuana cigarette when I entered high school, or I wouldn't know where to go. There was none available. Narcotics in those days was a different sort of thing. We didn't worry about it much. But by the time my children were in high school, they damn well knew where to get it. And I will say something more about that later. But drugs have been with us for a long, long time. 1700 in Macedonia, there's a column chiseled in the rock, which sets out, now this is 1700 BC in Macedonia. setting out a list of pharmaceuticals and what they're for. So it's better. Homer, if you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, refers to Helen's cup, which is a narcotic form that they lived in. So the most effective drug known for relief of pain is cocaine. There's morphine. Cocaine is a byproduct of that. One of the problems with the discussion of war and drugs is the definition of both war and the definition of drugs, as I said. We're not fighting all drugs, I just said so. But we import every year 400 tons of poppy opium, legally, not illegally, legally, because we use it. We produce things from it. It's kind of difficult to talk about a war when we have an internal argument about it. Let me tell you, 1983, a number of people in this room were present during the Seventh Circuit Bar Association meeting where I was conducting a Socratic dialogue on the subject of war on drugs. I see some smiles of recognition. We had on the panel, and there were 15 members of the panel, the prosecutor in the Noriega case. Noriega mean anything to you? He was president of Panama. We indicted and convicted him. He was on a panel. The former czar, drug czar under Nixon, was on the panel. And among other people were Judge Posner. Now, Judge Posner was a fairly recent addition to the bench, and he was fairly well known on the intellectual circuit, but this hub and dub was not his big thing, but I went through it. I don't know if you've seen this Socratic dialogue where I walk down and ask questions of people and they answer, and we move back and forth. It requires differences of opinion, and there were on that panel some people with defense lawyers, prosecutors, as they say, and people who were abstractly interested, including 2 doctors. So I got to Posner about a half an hour into the lecture, and I said, Judge, Posner, do you think we have a war on drugs? Which is the first question I asked him. He said, I don't know, but if we are, we're losing. And I said, do you have any solution to that? And he said, yes, they ought to legalize it. And I looked out at the crowd. There were 450 people there, and they had already pegged him as a far-right nut. And they thought this was the most great thing. I knew what the answer would be, not because I had asked the question before, but he's a libertarian. He thinks the government ought to stay the hell out of them, everybody said. So I said, why do you think that, Judge? And he said, because why should we spend billions of dollars to keep people from killing themselves? If they have that object in mind, why should we intrude ourselves? He said we do not ban cheeseburgers, double cheeseburgers, and they kill themselves with that. We tried to ban alcohol and it didn't work. He said, so the fact of the matter is it doesn't work. Why shouldn't we say, okay. I said, would you put any limitation on it at all? He said, certainly. The same as with liquor. Children should not be allowed to have these narcotics. Like they don't smoke cigarettes or don't drink beer when they're underage. No, at any rate, that was his position. He is not alone in that position. There are more people that are involved that really feel the government ought to stay the hell out of it. More than that, we have another little problem. The drugs that we're concerned about are the ones that become addictive in your dependency. Dependency is, and your tolerance becomes immediate. Early on, more and more and more are required of the drugs for you to reach the same level of high as you would have otherwise. And we have had these mixed discussions for years. Now think of the date of my birth. It was 1926. The first laws in the United States against drugs were passed in 1914. Before that, there was no law against the use of drugs. They sold heroin in cough syrup, and it said right on the bottom, contains heroin. And heroin, my friends, was introduced to the country by the government, the United States government. Frank McGarr, who was a member of the district court, said one of the great lines of all time is, whatever the federal government does, it does more or less badly. But at any rate, what they were seeking was a cure for what they call soldier's disease. And that is because the soldiers during the Civil War became addicted to what they were getting, which was morphine. Now, let me tell you something about morphine. It's a product from the opium poppy, and it is the most effective painkiller we have discovered. I know of, short of death, I know of no other one that will be, and it's widely used in the medical circuit because it's good. It helps people out. They had no idea what morphine did. But in the days of the Civil War, I call your attention to the fact they were still doing surgery without anesthesia. And the pain was enormous, and it lasted and lasted and lasted. When they could find enough morphine to reduce the pain, they used it freely. I pause again, back up. The hypodermic needle was invented in 1847 in Europe. It got to the United States in 1853, just in time for the Civil War. And what bothered most of the doctors that were working on patients in those days was the lack of enough morphine and enough needles to keep people from screaming and dying in absolute utter agony because their limbs were being sawed off while they sat there and gritted their teeth. Problem was, of course, they had no idea the addictive quality. So that after the war was over, and these literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of soldiers and sailors were back into the freedom, they continued to crave morphine and use it, and they'd do anything to get it. And the government supplied it. And then they introduced something to remove heroin, to remove morphine. They introduced heroin. Now, heroin has no, as does anybody know, medical use at all. It isn't worth a damn. It did, however, get rid of their dependency on morphine, but it went into a worse thing. So now, when I was U.S. Attorney, by the way, there was a big drive to bring in a different drug that would, and it's in use now, to get you away from heroin. I want you to know, as an historian, I was a little nervous about it. Their track record in this area was not exactly great. I don't know what the hell that was going to do. I remember, too, that one of the things that contributes to the problem we have is the fact that we overemphasize all problems. In the 30s, when I was a boy, there was a movie called Reefer Madness. Did anybody ever see it or hear of it? I do not recommend it to me, except as a comedy relief program. It predicted the most dire things from the use of marijuana. The response was, of course, that the legislators, state and federal, had to do something about it, and they passed more and more and more aggressive laws against use of it. And I want you to know they're still at it. Just for the hell of it, I've been in this court, as you just heard, since January 3rd of 1975. And past Monday, for the first time, I listened to a case involving coke, K-O-T. It's used in the Horn of Africa freely. It got here, I would guess, 1997. And it took a while to work its way up. It is chewed by 98% of the adult population in places like Somalia. But they came here and they still continue to chew it. They function, you see, quite well. But we put it on our prescribed list. That's not the first time. The Harrison Act, which is the 1914 act that outlawed heroin and the use of heroin and all the other things, had to put a few things in. One of the things they put in erroneously was cocoa leaves and so on. Cocoa leaves have a narcotic effect. So do cigarettes. So, by the way, does coffee. So does tea. So do all of it. But they've been chewing it for hundreds of years without any visible horror. The cocoa the plants that come from Central America and South America are originally grown in the high Andes, where life is kind of grim. And it's used because it puts you over the tough spots. That you can stand the high altitude, the cold weather, and the miserable thing. But they've been chewing it for years. When they come down, those natives that come down from the higher altitudes, they frequently, almost always, stop chewing cocoa leaves. And they don't have any withdrawal symptoms or anything else. But it is on our proscribed list. You can't use it. yield to no man in my horror of watching people who are addicted to drugs. I have, in my years of floating around, seen people in withdrawal on jail floors. It is not anything to watch. It's pleasant. But I don't think that overreacting is to put people like that in jail because they're using drugs. There has to be a medical solution to the problem. And there's another area where we have a distinct difference of opinion. Now, I want to read you something from what was one of my favorite books. It's a story of law, and it was written some long, long time ago. If I can find a damn thing, I brought it with me, just because I don't want to remember everything that I'm supposed to. Well, while I'm hunting, I'll give you a couple other statistics. 9/10 of all the poppy production is in Afghanistan. Did I tell you that? The prices are the economic incentive is it's 9% of Afghanistan's economy. So we try to stop it. What we're doing is raising the price. By the way, there is a surplus, it has been for years and years, of the production of opium for codeine and cocaine. See, that's a problem with getting old. I need cocaine. Cocaine came here in the 1880s. It is very pleasurable effects, they tell me. It's a recreational drug of choice among the wealthy. Crack just speeds up the thing, smoking crack, which is cocaine at a high power. But cocaine, if you remember, was talked about in as far back as I get no kick from cocaine. Mere alcohol doesn't throw me out at all. It was a very popular song in the years. But I Get a Thrill Out of You is the song, by the way, in case you're curious. My favorite song, however, was during the both wars. The government discovered the use of another byproduct, and they used it to enhance the ability of people to put up with a tremendous amount of hard work and so on. But all the armies used it. The Japanese army, the German army, the American army. It came out under the name of Benzedrine as a commercial product in 1932, and it was in use. So that it was not on a prescribed list. You could buy it over the counter. Benzedrine, it came in different forms. I remember in 1947, one of the great popular songs was "Who Put the Benzedrine in Mrs. Murphy's Ovaltine," which it is now highly prescribed, and we're checking it all together. I don't know if anybody's been paying the least bit of attention to the number of things that have occurred recently about people that are, I got to remind them about Posner. I did. And the soldier's disease, we'll pass that. And the government's use of methadone, that's the one I said bothered me completely. I'll give you a couple of figures so you can get an idea of whether or not we are winning the war. These are statistics on drug-related crimes and where the people are. And it is nearly half of the inmates in the federal prison were serving time for drug offenses in 2011. 48% of the people there were serving time for that. But the government figured that out fairly lately in life. When I was U.S. Attorney, the warden of the Cook County Jail was a fellow named Winston Moore, who was a guy about this high with a head like a cannonball. And he would drop his shoulders down and run into the head, right into the stomach of a recalcitrant prisoner. But he was a man of some sturdy position. I got a phone call from the Justice Department asking, did I know Winston Moore? Well, certainly I knew Winston Moore. I had been state's attorney in DuPage County. I said, could you ask him to do us a favor? We have 2 professors from the University of South Carolina would like to interview the prisoners, and he won't let them. And I said, well, for what purpose? And he said, well, they've been commissioned to find out whether there is a connection between drug use and crime. And I said, what are they receiving for this magnificent thing? He said, $250,000. Now remember, this is 1970. Had to be about $750,000 right now. So I said, well, I shall call Winston. I said, Winston, you could make me a big man at the Department of Justice. You can permit these. I don't want any pointy-headed professors here. And I said, Winston, they're not there to expose the conditions of the Cook County Jail. They are engaged on a mission, an academic mission, to find out something that will help humanity. And he said, what is that? And I said, they're trying to find out whether there's a connection between drug use and crime. There was a small pause there, and he said, shh. How much are they paying him? And I said, $250,000. Oh, shh. I'll do it for $50. But he said, since it's you, Willem, let him come in. I had a kind of a wacky experience when I was state's attorney in DuPage County. To those of you who are not familiar with the Chicago metropolitan area, DuPage County is immediately west of Cook County, just outside. Part of Chicago, believe it or not, is in DuPage County. The western half of the airport intrudes into the county. It is the wealthiest county in the state of Illinois. It is also the most educated county in the state of Illinois. The average educational level of the adult population is more than 12 years. That's the average. So that we used to pick jurors with presidents and vice presidents of companies all the way. The Chicago lawyers came up on it, but I thought we fixed the jury. And said, that's who lives here, right? You know, the Argonne National Laboratory is there. Batavia, lures people of intelligence and so on. At any rate, their idea of a narcotic pinch, to make the headlines, was a druggist who was selling paregoric and wasn't keeping track of it. And I had the misfortune of making the first marijuana bust, but it also involved heroin. I didn't know where to find it myself, but some newspaper reporter who had recently graduated from the Dill School of Journalism and was trying desperately to earn at an earlier age an award from them, inquired around until he found a 20-year-old who said he thought he'd get some marijuana. So he set up a purchase, and then the reporter asked him, could he get any heroin? He said, well, he didn't know, but he'd look around. So he finally called and said, yes, he found somebody with heroin, and he could buy the heroin. So the reporter set up a meeting where this delivery was to take place, and then went to see his editor. And his editor said, you better go to the state's attorney and tell him what you're doing. This is illegal possession of this evidence. So he came to see me. So I said, okay, I'll go with you. So I went with him with my chief investigator and made the bust. And of course, he had the newspaper story, and he wrote it, and so on. And several letters came to the editor saying that I was giving the county a bad name by making this. Why couldn't I just tell him, don't do it, and get out of town? I said, that, it's a good place to be. They're in favor of law and order. But I start that by telling you that there is a difference. Have you been paying any attention to statistics going on now? My state, Illinois, is in the process of legalizing marijuana for medical use. It is, however, the 18th state that is doing that. 8 states have legalized it for without restriction, and 2, Colorado and Washington, D.C., have approved it for recreational use. The city of Chicago, about a year ago, decided they would issue only tickets for those who have minimal amounts of marijuana. When I was state's attorney and when I went on the bench, the penalty for giving, loaning, or handing to or selling marijuana at any amount was a minimum of 10 years in the penitentiary. So that if a 17-year-old boy gave his locker mate in high school a toke, it was a minimum of 10 years. made the legislature look good. They were against crime. The difficulty is it was ridiculous. It was silly. Most states' attorneys simply ignored it. And a law that is ignored shouldn't be there at all. But I had the horrible position of sentencing somebody to 10 years, a 20-year-old, 10 years for. He made 3 brilliant sales of lousy marijuana. I mean, lousy was homegrown. You can grow it any place. And I gave him 10 years, and he made me pep up. He talked me, and I'm the judge sentencing him. I said, this is silly. And he said, Judge, I know you have to do it. Go ahead. When he went to jail, I wrote to the governor and asked him to reduce it. The governor was Ogilvy. He was a friend of mine and a law enforcement officer, former assistant United States attorney and former sheriff. And he reduced it to 5 years. And I called him. I said, you made a mistake. I want it reduced to time served, even if it's only 2 weeks. This is just ridiculous. About 3 weeks after that, no, 3 months after that, the Supreme Court of Illinois finally got around to saying it was a violation of the Illinois Constitution. It was cruel and unusual. But it takes a while for those things to sink in. At any rate, he got out, spent more time in jail than I would have wanted him to spend. Now, I have the story of law. It is directly contrary to the truth that law is something imposed by the legislative bodies upon the people. Acceptance has always been the theory and the fact. No rule of law was ever successful or endured unless it received practical general acceptance among the whole body of the people, for the simple reason that the universal human experiences has demonstrated that a rule of law not accepted by a considerable portion of the people can never be enforced. The history of law is strewn and will continue to be strewn by such palpable wrecks of law not enforced or enforceable. Date of the publication of this by this genius was 1922. So nothing has changed since then. The Tribune of April the 15th said that polls show that 53% of the people in the state think that marijuana should be legalized. 9 states have issues pending, 18 have already legalized it, as I said. And the fact of the matter is, if there is a war on drugs, we ought to declare that we won and get the hell out of there. I think, as a matter of practical fact, there are better ways. There must be a medical solution to these problems. We cannot treat people who are addicted and get caught in it as criminals and punish them. What we are doing is raising the prices to make it more and more attractive for people to grow it, more and more for people to produce it, and more people being killed in the process, even those being shot on the streets, inner gang wars. About 70% of the shootings that go on in the city of Chicago now are drug-related. They're drug gang shooting because the money is so big. What made the liquor prohibition so poorly run was the amount of money involved was so vast they wound up tempting people beyond their power to resist. Policemen, judges, citizens, everybody got involved because people didn't want it. People took up drinking that would never have drunk before. And we wound up with a lot of deaths, and left over an organized crime that's still floating around. I think we're slow learners. But what we ought to learn is that medical problems are medical problems, and that legal problems are solved not by passing a law against being sick, but by doing something to make sure that they get well. I admit the difficulty. I admit it costs an enormous amount of money. And I ask you in a general sense, what is it costing us now? What is it costing us not to do that? Why, in the name of God, can't we spend that money on something else that is more productive and more realistic, that leads to a realistic conclusion? So the war on drugs, I tell you, if there is one, is lost. And that, my friends, is my message. And tomorrow I can read about what a bum I am, giving the county a bad name. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I think Judge Barrow will take some questions if there are any.
Joan.
Prosecutors, judges.
Joan, she's got a microphone for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. There are two things that I think. One is how do you dismantle a system that's so massive with all the government prosecutors, judges, DEA agents, local police, all of that, whose jobs, and to say nothing of prisons and prison employment. It seems to me is like practically or politically impossible. And the other is that if you legalize drugs, it's not so easy when I'm sure you're always asked about that, but there are real issues around legalization.
I didn't say it was easy. Let me make a disclaimer here. I don't have any solution to the problem. All I'm doing is pointing out that what we're doing isn't working. Not that what I dream up can work, because I haven't dreamed anything up. I don't know. And you're quite right. There's organizations that have built in desire to keep it going. The street gangs are going to be unhappy if we legalize drugs. It drops the prices, for one thing. England has had a great experiment going, have had for a long time. They decided to feed the addicted users of heroin. Give it to them at government expense. And it was a hue and cry that things were bad. Well, they still have a drug problem. But one of the things that the government of the United States found out just very recently is the population receiving those drugs from the government are getting older and older and dying faster. And the younger group are not taking it up as rapidly. So that it is accidentally working themselves out. They didn't plot it out that way. It just came out that way. No, you're right. I don't know and I don't think what I'm talking about is politically possible. I do not think any state representative, I don't think any congressman could stand up on the floor of the House or the Senate and say, I think we ought to legalize drugs. He would not be there for the next term. He might not even be there for the rest of his term. I, on the other hand, fully aware of Article 3 of the Constitution. It says I can't be fired, can say whatever the hell I want to. Now, having said all that, I enforce the law as it's written. I write opinions sustaining convictions for drug abuse because that's the law. I am not the maker of the law. I am the one who says you passed this test or you didn't. But I privately can sit there and watch us go over Niagara Falls in a rubber raft and sob because we're losing no matter how you look at it. And we're losing things that we could spend on schools, health. We wouldn't have to worry about health. Everybody would be able to pay it. You have the concept of how much money is spent by the government, of state, county, federal, and so on, enforcing the laws having to do with drugs is just unbelievable. It's incredible. And it would be worth it as World War II is worth it if you thought you could win it and it was worth winning. But I don't think we can win it, and I don't think the way we're doing it is worthwhile. Now, having said that, I turn to somebody else for solutions. Medical field, place like that. There is a discussion among members of the medical field as to whether it's good. There is no unanimity of opinion. But there is as much of a unanimity of opinion. When it's not working, the states start passing things. But we have a silly one now where the federal government is against marijuana in all its forms and uses, and the states are permitting, various states are permitting use for medical purposes, which makes enormous sense to me, and some of them for recreational use, which makes less sense, but what the hell? If it's not going to kill them, or if they want to kill themselves doing it. We think that we can pass a law and solve problems. We can't. We can educate people to do things. We can hope. We can use medical intervention. We can do all those things. But we can't compel people to be moral or even sensible, not as a matter of law. So there you are. I agree with you. But nevertheless, I look for something better. I can hope. Any other questions? Any other drugs you're interested? Yes, sir.
Yeah, legalizing marijuana is one thing, but legalizing heroin strikes me that, I mean, theoretically, it strikes me that people, even if the commercial industry arose to supply the need, they get marketed to kids to create a market, that kind of thing, and this is still going to be vital.
No, I absolutely agree. Heroin has no use at all except to destroy lives.
Right.
It ought to be banned, smashed in the earth. And if they were doing it, I would be hardly in favor of it, but they're not. They're increasing production by accident. So I don't know what the solution is. As I said, England came to their solution, and they're still working with it. There are a number of countries in the world where the usage of drugs is ignored more than anything else. It's not condoned, it's just ignored, just the way we ignore. We set out to stop something about cigarettes. I wish they'd gotten to it a little earlier, but they didn't. Anyhow, we have reduced the amount of smoking in the United States from 60% of the adult population to slightly over 24%. And we did it by education, not by coercion. Although I do remember my grandfather describing one of his friends, he said it wasn't the whiskey that killed him, it was the tax on the goddamn stuff. It's highly possible that the increased cost of cigarettes has produced that. But it's more than that. It's been an educational process, and it seems to be working. People smoking now are the young people, and they're smoking in fewer groups. When I was 14, I started to smoke. It was a rite of passage. My daddy did it. My uncles did it. Everybody, the school teachers did it. Pick a number. So they'll prove that I was already an adult. I smoked. And some 50 years later, or 40 some odd years later, I quit smoking, and there you go. And I like to say, had I known then what I know now, I wouldn't have started. That's probably a lie. Young people like it, make it risky. That's why the Army is better for young people than old people. So that when you're 18 years old or 19, you say, oh, you get out of this boat, and you go down there and go up there, and they're shooting at you and throwing them, but you just get out and go. And they say, okay, boom, they're gone. By the time you're 25, you're going to think, woo, there must be some other way. Can we negotiate this? By the time you're 35, you better be a colonel, because otherwise, you tell them, go. But young people do it, and that's why the younger make better soldiers. There's nothing, we operate our drug war as we do on other things that we think are not right by suggesting that we can't make you do this, but we can make you wish you had. So we will put you in jail for a long, long time if you do what we don't want you to do. That's right, 48% of those in federal penitentiaries are there for some drug-related crime. That's just silly. And not emerge one. Okay. So, I don't know any political answer to the problem is.
I was curious what you think about the war on drugs and how it's applying now, not so much with prescription pills and the way everybody's abusing that, even more so than some of the street drugs.
The prescriptive drugs and abuse of these prescriptions.
Yeah,
prescriptive drugs can be abused by medical profession, members of the that I would have something to do about. That is something you stop. The misuse of your office, the misuse of any office, political or otherwise, I think should be punished. Doctors who violate their oaths, who don't administer properly to their patients, or willy-nilly prescribe drugs that are not needed, or try to cheat the Medicare and Medicaid by sending bills. I think they are perfectly able to prosecute. But if you make a mistake in prescribing drugs, well, a lot of people get caught with prescriptive drugs they start to take for a perfectly good medical reason, and then they find they can't wean themselves from it, and they need help. We had a federal penitentiary in Lexington, Kentucky. It's still there, by the way. But it was originally designed in two parts. One was a hospital, and the other was a jail. But one thing it had in common, they were all narcotic addicts. Most of the ones got caught on medical prescriptions they couldn't get rid of. They became utterly dependent on it. The dependency on These drugs are just unbelievable. They'll kill to get it. They'll steal, they'll rob from their mothers to do it. They'll do anything. So they would put those people in the hospital section. The other ones they put in the penitentiary. Now, one of the interesting things, if you turned yourself in voluntarily, they'd put you in the hospital section. Oh, and by the way, if you had been there for a while, you get a weekend off, you can go out and wander around the neighborhood at least. If you didn't, you'd go to the other side. They found out that they would transfer people from the one where you voluntarily go in to the ones where you went in involuntarily and got sentenced. They called them winders because they'd wind in and out. They'd come in, turn themselves in, go through the detox, get out, get to the point where they could support their drug habit again with enough money, get it past that, then they'd go back in and get detoxed and get back out. Winders. So they finally decided the hell with that, they weren't going to do it. They put them all in the penitentiary side. I thought they were onto something, but they tried it for 22 years and it didn't work. But at least there was somebody trying to come up with a sensible solution to what it seems to be an almost insolvable problem. But we keep making it more and more profitable for people to manufacture drugs and bring them in here, and more profitable for street gangs to break in the next group of people who will be users and addicted to it because of so much money. There is a feeling in yes, sir.
Would you please give us a fuller explanation of the British policy on drugs, both how it works and your appraisal of its pluses and minuses?
They started some years ago, decided that what they would do was take hardcore addicts, that is, a doctor would say that this man is addicted to the use of heroin or 2 or 3 other drugs, major drugs, and there is no way to break him of the habit. That if we take him off the habit, he goes through this, we can detox him, he'll be back on it in 40 minutes. Okay, we'll supply it so he doesn't have to steal to get money to raise it. He doesn't have to kill to do it. They're trying to reduce it. And they tried it, and we looked upon it, let's say, askance. We thought it wouldn't work. It has not done as much as they thought it would, but they're surprised to find out that the older ones are dying off. And I don't have an appraisal of it because they will not release all those figures. They don't have a Freedom of Information Act that's available to me. I have the figures available that they serve to the international community, and we have international communities working in this. Interpol works with drug stuff. Those of you who see motion pictures like the French Connection know that drugs come in from all over. We get ours from South America, Africa, lots from Africa, China. Because when I majored in history. I get a couple other people that do here, I know. I majored in history so nobody would offer me a job. I wanted to go to law school. I was afraid if somebody offered me a job, I'd be tempted. And so I graduated with a degree in history, was driving a cab. And I remember one night, a man got in the cab about 2 in the morning, and he said, after we'd gone about 3, he said, "Is that a college ring you're wearing?" I said, "Yes, it is." "So why are you driving a cab?" I said, "It's the only job I get that was worth it." He said, "Oh my God." He said, "What'd you major in?" I said, "History." He said, "Oh, that's like majoring in penmanship." But in history, they talked about the Opium Wars, the Chinese Opium Wars. I thought it was the British going in to save the Chinese. Au contraire. It was the British being mad at them because they were trying to stop the opium trade, the Chinese were. And it was very lucrative to the British from Burma and the places around that were producing it. They produced, in the year 300 BC, the Mediterranean area produced enough narcotics through opium poppies to supply the whole world with being on not all the time. And when we get around to the times in the 70s when we had 60s and 70s when the drug thing came up here. We had a distinguished professor at Harvard named Timothy O'Leary, who became a kind of a big, turn on, tune in, and drop out. advocating the use of drugs. Now, the newspapers pilloried him, the government hated him, but man, he had a following of kids. They all thought, this is a professor, from Harvard. Collins Fitzpatrick went to Harvard. I'll never let him forget it. I don't think he and Timmy were buddies. Yes, sir.
So if the question is what can you do that's successful, you kind of have to decide what you mean by success. If by success you mean nobody should ever use drugs, that's impossible.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. But if by success you mean that you could greatly reduce certain problems, then there are things that succeed. For example, with the problem of prescription drug abuse, the problem was that there was no way to track it. You could go to 6 different doctors, 6 different pharmacies, and nobody would ever know.
Yeah.
So the solution that most states, actually at this point I think all states, have adopted is to create a database.
Right.
And every doctor who prescribes certain drugs and every pharmacy that fills a prescription is supposed to report to this database,
Right.
and then the pharmacists and the doctors are supposed to look at the database before they prescribe again. The point of this is not to provide tools to law enforcement to enforce the law, although that is available. The point of it is to create a kind of a social pressure on practitioners to self-police, because everybody knows what they're doing through the database. And it has, where it's been adopted for a while, proven to be pretty successful.
It's quite effective. You're quite right, but it depends on constant inspection of the drug thing, and they go around. And I said that constituted a drug bust in the county in which I was state's attorney for a few years, where some guy prescribed 2 pints of paregoric because he had a farmer who had cows with diarrhea. And then the record would show 2 pints. And he said, what did he get somebody 2 pints? He could get small doses. And he said, well, because his cows were red. And then they'd come to me and want me to prosecute him. I said, no. I don't like sick cows. No, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. You count success at reducing foolishness and reducing the crime somewhat. We have laws against murder. The 2 cities with the greatest anti-gun rules were Chicago and Washington, D.C. Which 2 cities had the largest murder rates, do you suppose? Chicago and D.C. So you can't pass a law to cure something. But the working to reduce the number is important. I would be satisfied with a modest success of not wasting all our money and talents on chasing a will-o'-wisp that can't win. You can't win them all. But we can reduce it. We have to have sensible ways of doing it. And we don't have any now, or if we do, they're keeping it a secret. No, I do not think, I would not, first of all, you aren't going to stamp out drugs anyway because we need them. As I said when we started this, everybody in this room is dependent on drugs now, or has been, and will be, until we die at least, in our modern society. I'm willing to give up coffee, tea, booze. Now, wait a minute. You guys have to be reasonable about this thing. But I agree with you that you have to figure out what is it you're looking for. And what I'm looking for is simply a reduction in stupidity. And I don't know what the answer is, but I know what we have isn't working. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. Your Honor, this is a 2-part question, if you could bear with me.
Wait, on the one hand.
All right, you ready? The first is about career offender enhancement, and I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about careering out individuals whose predicate offenses are simply low-level drug offenses. And second part is, just to pick your brain, what are your thoughts about introducing federal drug courts that have shown high success rates on a state level to reduce recidivism and...
Well, let's take the second one first.
Sure.
I am not against drug courts as an experiment or anything else. Matter of fact, if you remember the rules, the federal government ideally said experimental labs on things new in the law should be at a state level. Find out whether they work. We got 50 laboratory sites. If that works, then we can adopt it. If it doesn't work, we can see if we can refine it. First one, that's a different subject altogether. Sentencing is what you're talking about, and I was against the mandatory sentencing. I'm against, but I took that position when they passed the goddamn sentencing guidelines, which is a Scrabble game of sorts. I'm not alone in that, but I said it before it passed, and you can see how effective I was. So I don't know, and I don't have an opinion on the subject.
Thank you.
Nobody?
Do you think we would ever get to the point as a nation where we would consider adjusting some of the what's grouped under rights, like freedoms, for use of drugs? Like if somebody chose to and continued to be a user, wanted to be a user, or whatever description they would have, to have housing places or communities or...
We subsidize them. That's the British system. We subsidize them. We put them in a place and let them have the food. No, I don't think we'll ever have it. I don't think the United States will accept it politically. I don't think the people will accept it. And I know damn well the legislature won't accept it. The solution, whenever some crime breaks out, somebody passes a new law, which is supposed to... We've got a law against burglary, as I told you. And it does not improve or reduce the number of burglaries by passing another law against burglary or increasing the penalty. And I don't know why, but it's fact. A good part of human behavior is based on habit. So at some place we have to develop habits in younger people. One of the reasons, by the way, that most violent crime is between the ages of, say, 18 and 35 is because they have not developed enough habits at the age of 15. By the time you're 30 years old, if you decided you want to steal a car and you've never stolen a car before, it'll be one of the toughest things you ever did. But if you're 15 years old or 16 and you pass a car and the keys are in it, what passes for virtue, generally speaking, the adult population is poor health. And for all of us, it's lack of opportunity. One of the professional groups that's most susceptible to misuse of drugs is the medical profession. You want to know why? It's available. It's there. If a lawyer decides he's going to take up drug things, where does he go? He has to go to a doctor. He has to start stealing. Well, by the way, doctors for years have been, the Sherlock Holmes fine-tuned his brain with shots of cocaine. Sherlock Holmes was a splendid detective, dreamed up by a doctor. He was a medical doctor that wrote all those Sherlock Holmes. And he used the stuff himself and said so. See, but back to my habits. I said some years ago I could solve all crime involving murder, manslaughter, violent crimes. Lock up everybody from 15 to 35. And cuts down things. At old age, it gets a little tougher. There is one good thing about getting as old as I am. It's both good and bad. The chances to get into trouble are much smaller. That's the bad part. The good part is my conscience doesn't bother me.
Judge, I just wondered, because I know Tom Fairchild loved talking with you, if you could at least share either a story that he loved hearing or that you love remembering about him.
Well, probably not, because the statute of limitations isn't one on me. I think Tom was a man I respected as much as I respect anybody I ever met. And I worked with him, fortunately, for years. We became good friends. He said very little disparaging people. He did not like pomposity, and he certainly didn't like phonies. And his offhand remark on a phony would be just about that. Poof, phony. And I could share this much with you. I never met a man that was more fit to be a judge than Fairchild. And I can't imagine any clerk of his not having experienced that magnificence of his presence and his brain. He was smarter than hell. And he was also very tolerant of people. He was a good judge, but he was not particularly judgmental. He forgave people when lesser mortals would be kicking the wall. And he turned away wrath. I remember one time we were on the bench, the three of us, and he was presiding, and somebody marched in the room. He was wearing some kind of a uniform before him, marching, walked forward, walked right up, stepped over it, Sir, what are you looking for? And he says, justice. And he said, sir, if you'll go to the clerk in the other room and sign your name in, you will be called, and we will talk to you. And the guy says, thank you, saluted and walked out. And we went on with the argument. I have been with judges who would have had him clapped in irons. Haul him away. But not Thomas. He was that kind of a guy. He was also presiding one time when a lawyer, we had a third judge who was from the Sixth Circuit visiting on the far end, and a lawyer stepped up to start his argument and passed out, ploop, flat. Now, I had never seen this. And so everything stopped, and Tom said, pick him up. And so I leaned over and said, has his time expired too? And Tom said, no. By the way, the judge from the Sixth Circuit turned about the color of my shirt. It had panned out that about a month before, while he was hearing cases in Cincinnati, a lawyer got up in front of him and dropped dead. And he thought that's what happened this time. I said, so, I don't know. I have a cartoon I will be glad to give you. By the way, he said earlier on, he asked for jokes that were off color. He could buy a book of these. But when he went on vacation, he used to send me cartoon clippings, and some of them were absolutely magnificent that you couldn't even show to your wife. But they were funny. Well, I'll give you one. He's got Moses looking up at the mountain, and he said, cut off the ends of what?
May not be aware that when you come to the University of Wisconsin and you do us the great honor of giving this kind of speech, you get a gift. This is the gargoyle. All of you who are University of Wisconsin connected know how much we value this hideously ugly image and how much it means to us when we give it to a friend and say, please, it's really heavy. You don't have to carry it home, I promise.
No, Colin Fitzpatrick will carry it. Circuit executive has got a lot of jobs.
Display it with pride, please.
Thank you.
Please join me again in thanking the judge for joining us for this